format of tonight's meeting is to have a guest speaker share their experience, strength and hope on how Alcoholics Anonymous program of recovery is working in their lives for 15 to 20 minutes. Tonight we have asked Martin to share.
Good evening, my name's Martin, alcoholic and sober today. And it's great to be here, and it's great to see so many faces that I see on a regular basis. Hope is something for me that's really important with AA. When I got here there was none, and I used to live around here. I used to have a nice house in Beaconsfield Parade probably 10 years ago, and things were getting pretty tough when I lived down there. But things hadn't really gone off the rails totally, At that stage I still had a partner, still had a house, still had a business, still saw my children. But everything was going wrong in my life. Going back to when I was young, in the early days, I'd always been a heavy drinker, and I'd always partied, and I'd always had a lot of fun. I was forever chasing women, my pants were falling off and things were fine. And it was that fun and the excitement that used to happen, and the funny stories and the laughs in my teens and my early 20s that I chased for the rest of my life when I was drinking. But those times had well and truly gone. As I started to get older and I was a daily drinker, I'd always drunk to blackout. Once I started to drink, I couldn't stop. And I was always pretty smart because I'd always make sure there was more alcohol at home, so when I'd been out for the night I could drink more, because that's the way I liked to drink. But over time it became a reliance on alcohol and a dependence. I was at work and I couldn't wait to get out of work to have my next drink. And then I started to disappear from work. And when I was disappearing from work, I was going to the pub. I had my own business, so I could disappear between businesses, and I wasn't accountable to anyone. And that started to dominate even my working life. And I wasn't coping with life too well, and I discovered the morning drinks. And then things were a disaster, terrible. When I left Beaconsfield Parade, I ended up in Glen Iris, and we're living in the family home still. I was going to the doctor then because I was getting depressed, and I was always anxious. I was starting to get panic attacks, and I couldn't really understand why. I came to AA about 9 years ago, and I came to a couple of meetings. I came to a couple of meetings because I was in the shit with my partner. And I had to do something just to smooth that over. And once I had, I could start to drink a bit, and then really within a couple of days I was back to normal. Came back again a couple of years later, and I came back again then to try and keep that relationship, but it was too late. It was 2006. I ended up doing a couple of detoxes and was thrown out of the family home. My behaviour by that stage was terrible. My partner didn't know how much I was drinking, but I was just focusing on alcohol. No matter what I was doing, all I could think of when I was going to have that next drink. She wanted someone in the home who was going to be a good father, who was going to be reliable, who was going to be dependable. And I wasn't that anymore. So I ended up in my mid-40s living with my parents. The same stage, people say, how can you lose a business when you're an alcoholic? Well, it's very easy. If you're not there and you're absent, and you've got a lot of technological changes happening, and your staff don't respect you anymore, and you're not functioning and firing on all fours, that's how it happens. So while I was in the detox, I handed my business over to an administrator. At the same time, I lost the house and access to my children. I lost access to my children because I wasn't a responsible adult. That started the real stage of my alcoholism, where I was in total self-pity and I'd given up on life. While I was at my parents' house, I drank, and that's all I did. My father had terminal cancer and I couldn't cope with life, All I knew then was to drink. And I wasn't a help in the home, I was a hindrance. While my father was dying, and I'm not proud of it, he was in hospital, I was outside having a drink because I needed it to cope, to get on with things, and he died. Nurse came out to get me. Shortly after that, my mother threw me out the family home and I ended up sleeping in parks. I slept in residential parks. And I was incapable of getting to a men's shelter because in the morning I'd start to drink and then I wouldn't know what the fuck was going on. You've got to remember, not too long before that I was living in somewhere I owned in Beaconsfield Parade, and I had more people than there are in this room working for me. And then I'm a bum in a park. And this isn't all self-pity, this is only my story and it's the truth. But it's the way that alcoholism progressed through my life. So I ended up in a rooming house, and a rooming house is a pretty ordinary place. You've got a lot of blokes, some of you may have been there. And it's just full of alcoholics and drug addicts and people who've given up on life like me. And I was totally negative at that point in time. Ending up in hospital, I'd done hospital many times and ambulances and hospital trips. I won't go into that, but I ended up with a hospital admissions risk program counsellor on my case, because someone was worried about my health. At the same time, I couldn't go on like that anymore, I couldn't go on sitting in a small room drinking cask wine 24 hours a day, because that's what it had become. I was physically dependent on it, and I couldn't go through a day without drinking, much less a morning. So when I got out of hospital, couldn't on the first day out, but on the second day out I jumped on a tram, and that's just catching a tram without a ticket, because that's the way I used to get around, and I got to an AA meeting. That's one I'd done a couple of years before, and I got a meetings book. And, I didn't know what I was going to do, but what I wanted to do was I wanted to stop drinking. And I went to a church with a meetings book, and I found out how to get to meetings by trams, because it's hard to jump buses and it's hard to jump trains without tickets. And I started to do meetings, and I started to do a meeting a day. Pretty soon after that I was doing 2 meetings a day, and quite often 14 meetings a week. And I was staying out of the rooming house, and I was starting to listen to people, starting to listen to what was said in meetings, and I was starting to get to meetings early, and I was starting to get to meetings late. And I get back to hope because it's a really important thing. I got a sponsor, and before I knew it I started to do the steps. And I'm not here to tell you about the steps or how to do them. Your sponsor will do that, or a big book group. But they're a really important part of the program, because I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and I was a busted man. But what I need to do is I need to live as a better person and to become more honest, reliable, tolerant, just. And I'm not perfect at any of those things, but I work on those things now. Step 10's an important part of my life. I do that every day, but I don't do it just at night, I do it during the day. Sometimes I do it in the morning. But we have a gift with Alcoholics Anonymous. It's an absolute gift. At the beginning of 2010 was when I had a crack at AA for the first time seriously. And my recovery hasn't been perfect because I've had a couple of busts. And they've been terrible. They haven't been for long, but they've been terrible. They've put me straight back to the way I used to drink, 24 hours around the clock. For me, there's no difference. I can't drink as a social drinker. I can't go out and have fun. There's no laughter, there's no fun. But if I choose not to drink today, and I have a choice now in life I didn't used to have. By doing that, now I'm employable. I start to work a day a week, 2 days a week. Now I'm working 4 days a week by choice, not 5. You know, I've managed an accounting firm while I've been sober. I've worked as a painter, now I'm doing maintenance in an aged care facility. I've worked in sales and installation in air conditioning. You know, I turn up every day, I do my job, I'm reliable and I'm honest. Now, they're all things that I couldn't do. I didn't see my children for 4 or 5 years, and that's because I wasn't honest and reliable and I wasn't a good father figure. But by doing a lot of meetings and by doing the steps and becoming, again, dependable, and over a period of time, it can't happen overnight, it had to be a period of time. Because Karen had lost all faith in me with the children. And as a byproduct of getting sober, one of the things I despaired about was not seeing my children. Now, I blamed that on everyone else, but it wasn't everyone else's fault, it was my fault because of my behaviour. Now I see my children, I see them every week. Some weeks I see them twice a week, they can ring me up whenever I want. You know, my mother, who threw me out of the family home, who'd just had enough of me, she injured herself and she lives in Yarrawonga. So I was going up there once a week or every 10 days. And I was able to look after her and help her and organise the things that she needed to have done so that she could live in her home. Now, I couldn't do those things when I was drinking. I'm able to contribute and help to that lady now where I never could. There are other things in life that I used to enjoy doing that I couldn't because I'd given up on life. You know, I could never play guitar for shit, and I still can't, but I could pick up a guitar and have a go at it. You know, as I start to work, coming from the person who was dressed in Salvo's shoes, I was able to start to gradually buy some things so I don't look like a bum all the time. You know, I finally bought a car so I could get around instead of public transport. Now, they're material things, and I don't aspire to a lot of material things now, but they're things that make life good and easy. You know, I was able to buy a surfboard and start surfing again. So all of those things that I'd given up on, I was able to start to put back into my life. And when my oldest son, who's 12 now, we were in Noosa when he was 5. I had him standing up on a surfboard then. Now, the kids just want to go down the beach with Dad. And I love those things. I love those things. Part of this program too that's really important, and for me I think it's central, I think, is giving back to people. You know, I was on the way to this meeting and I want to get here on time and I want to think about what I was going to say, and I was going to have it all mapped out, which I haven't done. I thought I'd do it off the cuff. Now, the guy who rang me up, and he does every couple of months, because he's still a really active alcoholic. He lives in rooming houses and he's fucked. And I thought, not again. And he rang me up, and you know this guy, I went over to see him once and he was really sick. He was shivering, shaking, trying to get him into a detox, and he was adamant he had to do one. And I went round there and I left the lady I was seeing. I had to go and see this guy. I had to go and buy him some wine because he wasn't safe. And he was telling me that there was someone they hadn't seen for a couple of days, so I went to see how his mate was, and he was not as well as he used to be. He was fucking dead. And that's what happens from this disease. So I grabbed he and his mate in, and I took them into the room and I told them, that's what they're going to end up like. And that's reality. It's a reality where when you drink and you drink like this and you get to a point where you're at the bottom of the barrel, that's the way things are. You know, this guy's still in denial, but I've said to him, look, there's a seat there and one day maybe you might choose to come here. But I can't chase him, and I can't chase him. It's only up to him. I'm so grateful for all of AA. There are some things in here that I found have been really helpful that I was told to do and that I finally started to listen. One was to get phone numbers. And I use those phone numbers and I do actually ring people up. And you know, that's made a big difference in getting to know people. It's also been instrumental in me when I've had those couple of busts to get on the phone and ring up and to ask for help. Now, none of us think that that's going to happen to us. I didn't think it was going to happen to me, but it has. You know, the hand and the support and the friendship that we get from these rooms, you can't put a price on it. If anyone walks away with one thing tonight, I think those phone numbers is critical. For me, honesty's been really important, and I need to get more honest now. You know, the second sponsor I had, who took me through the steps again, made me memorise something, and it's really true. You know, it's really true. And it's at the forward of the 12 and 12, and it's AA's 12 steps are a group's principles, spiritual in their nature, which if practised as a way of life can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. What that says to me is that the principles in the 12 steps, there's a number of them, not just one, there's a group, that they need to be practised as a way of life, not just read and done, but you need to live them. To expel is to eject by force the obsession to drink and to live a happy and useful life. I mean, that's all I want to do. I want to be happy and contribute. Without AA, I've got no chance of doing that. With AA, I do. And with the support and the friendship that I have from this program, it's just fantastic. Thanks for letting me share.